Step 1. Cut your dialogue in half. Your speech bubbles should have one sentence at the absolute maximum, and panels shouldn't have more than 2 speech bubbles. You can get more wordy as you get more experience, but odds are being too attached to your dialogue and not letting your art carry the story is holding you back. If you feel you can't tell your story with less dialogue, you need to restructure your story to be shorter. And as you're hacking away, consider how the text moves the story. Do the words elevate the visuals? I know this sounds basic, but I've read professional comics where the text and images are a confusing mishmash. At its best, a verbal visual dissonance can be used for comedic or dramatic purposes. At its worst, you're confusing your readers by throwing conflicting information their way. Try to stay conscious of how the art and text come together to form your story. Step 2. Now that your dialogue is cut in half, make your panels bigger. Each page should have an emphasis panel. This is touched on a bit in Chapter 2 of the Shonen Jump Guide to Making Manga. The emphasis panel is the biggest panel on the page, and you should structure the rest of the page around it. They say to make it about 1/4 of the page. I think that's a good rule, but I wouldn't get too hung up on the exact ratio. Emphasis panel isn't something I see widely discussed in English, and for me, finding out about this was like a cheat code for amazing paneling. It gave me a new perspective, and considering how other mangaka utilize their emphasis panels was a huge help in manga paneling. One manga I strongly recommend for its use of emphasis panels is Stellar Witch Lips. This manga uses about 4 to 6 panels per page, with plenty of giant, dazzling 1 to 2 frame pages to show off the magical girls looking cool. This manga greatly reshaped how I think of page economy. They're able to fully stuff the page and move the story along in 4 panels. Instead of thinking, what's the most efficient way to move the plot along, Stellar Witch Lips prioritizes what's the most pleasant and eye-catching way to ease the reader through the plot. Since I read Stellar Witch Lips, I try to make most of my pages around 4 to 6 panels per page, and keeping this rule in the back of my head while I storyboard has been a huge help. Now, if you want a manga that utilizes panel efficiency that you're more likely to find at your local library, I'd recommend My Hero Academia Volume 1. Specifically, pay attention to the pages that use 4 panels. Take note of how these pages move the story along, and try to aim for that when you're storyboarding. But you're still going to find a lot of educational value in the pages that cram the page with panels and dialogue. Hiroaka strongly executes a lot of concepts discussed in Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, which I'm assuming you've already studied front to back if you've ended up on my YouTube channel. So Hiroaka has a lot of smaller panels that show quick succession of movement, giant panels to let the story breathe, single panels that show the passing of time. I haven't read the entire series, so I can't personally vouch for if it keeps up this incredible paneling, but as for mainstream Shonen Jump titles go, it starts very strong, and I see it as something worth studying. So now that your dialogue is cut, you're ready to wield the emphasis panel. Step 3 is cutting the number of panels in half. You don't have to follow my soft rule of 4 to 6 panels per page. That might be too extreme for you, but you should at least make your panels bigger and see how that unfolds in the storyboarding stage. If you're flexible with yourself in the planning stage, you will get better. I see a particular kind of math unfolding with newbie mangaka. You might think, I have this idea for a one-shot, I could draw 20 pages in a week, so I need to fit my idea within these pages. When you're too attached to fitting an idea in a certain number of pages, that's when panel cramming is at its worst. If you're working with a writer, they might have a certain idea of what they want to happen on each page. That is, I'll see writers commission an artist for a 20-page comic and they need certain plot beats to happen to get their money's worth. In those cases, your hands are kind of tied, and if you want them to commission you again, the customer is always right. Now, I know that sounds like an incredibly specific set of circumstances, but I want you to consider this. If you write a script before you storyboard, are you too attached to your ideas? And are you thinking of this the same way as you would if a suspiciously wealthy furry handed you their script to illustrate? If you're the author and illustrator of a manga, you need to give yourself the creative freedom to deviate from your script. I personally have stopped scripting my manga. At most, I'll have a bullet point outline of what I want to happen, but for the most part, I go straight to storyboarding. I've heard a lot of mixed opinions on whether or not you should script beforehand, so it's hard for me to put my hoof down and say if one method is better than the other. But if your goal is to get good at paneling, try it without scripting. Now, if you're illustrating someone's script for fun, hopefully they're more okay with you going off the rails and improvising to find what works best for the story. Some of my favorite manga I've illustrated were written by Koltrick. He's brilliant at generating ideas and creating tightly crafted, satisfying narratives. I'm very lucky to have found him, and he was totally cool with me throwing away chunks of his dialogue and drawing what felt right. Absolute disrespect towards his scripts, I'm so sorry. He had that trust in me to go with my instincts, but if he had more of an ego over keeping his script as is, I would not have worked with him again and again. Now, step 4 is very context specific, but it's something that's really helped me, and that is cut the silliness. So after I read Chainsaw Man, I thought, Holy guacamole. Fujimoto is a god. He's doing all of these crazy inventive things. I want to do this too. So I did my best to copy his paneling style, and while I thought I was really cooking, the editor that reviewed my work said otherwise. I had a meeting with an editor from Kodansha's Palsy, and he pointed out that there was a lot going on with the paneling when it doesn't need to be so boisterous. He said that the paneling is part of the story's delivery, so when it's zipping around the page and doing all of these silly angles and non-standard shapes, it needs to serve a purpose. If you're doing this constantly, it'll exhaust and confuse the readers. Now, I'm saying this with the giant disclaimer that this might just be this single editor's taste, and it's only specific to this one-shot I made 3 years ago. But since he pointed it out, I've straightened up my manga panels, and it's made my work a lot stronger. The one-shots I made after this editor meeting pretty strictly use squares and rectangles for paneling, and flash forward a few years to my one-shot AI is Evil, where I tried to keep the panel layout pretty standard and go with kookier panel shapes during the big climactic action sequence. Lately, I've been warming up to more non-standard paneling shapes after being more strict with myself, but I still try to save this technique for when the story needs that extra push. When I'm pursuing Manga Plus creators, I see a lot of non-standard panel shapes where it doesn't necessarily need to be non-standard, and it's not adding anything to the story. Basically the same mistake that I made those years ago. I'm imagining if these authors handed me their work and asked, how do I improve this paneling? I would first straighten everything out so everything's a rectangle. If I may continue to project my own thought process onto other rookie creators, I think a lot of this comes from manga-ka looking at something like Watchmen and thinking, I understand paneling with a strict grid system, but I'm really clever and creative, so I can make something with a little more pizzazz. So I'll share with you what I've been telling myself in the mirror every morning. You are not better than Watchmen. You're not making the next Chainsaw Man. You need to calm down. Exciting doesn't always mean better. Conversely, if your work uses very strict and rigid paneling, opening up and trying something more loosey-goosey might be what you need. No matter what kind of paneling you're doing, look at your most recent manga one-shot and be honest with yourself about what you're making. Is your style more silly or is it more strict? And push yourself to try the opposite for your next one-shot. If you're experimenting with different approaches, your style will evolve and you will find what works for you. So that brings me to my next point. Now that you know these hot tips, how do you effectively practice to get good at paneling? Well, 4-page manga is a great place to start. Manga Meets, which is Shueisha's rookie manga website for shoujo and josei manga, holds a monthly 4-page manga contest where applicants are asked to make a 4-page manga centered around a theme. Previous themes include looking up, a secret held between two people, first, doting affection, bad boys, mutual unrequited love, chocolate. It's all very shoujo core, most of them easily lend themselves to romantic scenarios. And even if you have zero interest in making your work in Japanese or making shoujo manga, paying attention to these contests and their entries will benefit you. You'll see how other artists approach the same problem, and if you could tell a story in 4 pages, you're going to level up across the board. Don't think of it as, but how can I tell a complete plot in 4 pages? Approach it more as a self-contained scene that plays out a conflict resolution or a setup punchline. In the Shonen Jump Guide to Making Manga, there's considerable time spent on different 2-page manga prompts. These are valuable, and you should try this exercise for yourself. However, I'm specifically telling you to pay attention to Manga Beat's 4-page contest, since as of this writing, there's a new one every month, and getting more involved and having that social aspect, even if you're just observing from afar, this will help you. But if you're more in that grind set and you just want an exercise to help you level up your paneling, this is what I recommend. Take a manga that already exists and make a storyboard based on that manga that is like downgraded, like you transcribe it, if that makes sense. Let me show you one I did based on Akane Banashi Chapter 58. I think just doing the thumbnails is fine, but I wanted to get a sense of how the camera was used, so I also took note of its placement. I don't think this element of the exercise is totally necessary. I was just curious for my own sake. Now, this exercise works best if you're able to buy a physical manga magazine. You flip through, you find a manga that's particularly eye-catching, and you break it down in thumbnails. If that is outside your price range, you can go to Pics of Comics or Nico Nico Manga. They update every day with new free comics. Find whichever one looks cool. That's the one you're making a storyboard for today. If you do this every day for a month and stay conscious of how different artists lay out their pages, you will find what you like and dislike. You will understand the rhythm of different manga. You will get better at storyboarding. If you want to take this exercise a step further, Take a scene from a movie or TV show and make a manga storyboard based on that scene. Don't think of how to accurately translate the scene for manga and making a one-to-one reinterpretation, but rather think of how the scene would work best in a hypothetical manga adaptation. Manga is a monosensory medium, so how are you going to translate the lighting, sound, actors' performances into a manga to get the same feeling? Now, I want to round off this video with some hot takes. So I see in a lot of how-to panel guides a big emphasis on page turners, building anticipation. Each page should end with a hook to keep the readers engaged, and I think this is something that is greatly overemphasized to newbies. You should trust your readers, and if you have an interesting story, they'll keep reading. I think at the higher level, you could start thinking of the page-turning hook, but I don't think this is as necessary as some guides make it out to be. This is more of a necessity to newbies if you're deliberately challenging yourself to make each page with a Kisho Tenketsu structure, but I think that as you read and study more manga, the structure of a page and what happens on a page-to-page basis will start to come more naturally. You don't need to overload your brain with, but wait, what about the hook? My second hot take is just because something is published doesn't mean it's good. It might be hard to hear me from the bottom of the crab bucket, but look, bad manga gets published all the time. If you're only reading manga that's available in print and translated, yeah, they have definitely cleared a certain threshold of quality and popularity to make it this far. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is the cream of the crop. Look, I love Sailor Moon, but I would not recommend it as reading material for constructing a manga. I have a feeling it stayed in print in English for as long as it has because of nostalgia for the TV anime and the fact that it's become a widely marketable brand. So my favorite podcast is Shonen Flop. It's a show where they go into deep dives for canceled manga. And something very funny happens as Shonen Flop continues. You see over the course of the podcast, the hosts develop a sense for when a manga is going to be prematurely canceled. That is, they'll say things like, hey, I had a feeling that this was going to get axed from the first chapter. It immediately gave off Flop vibes. And I'm bringing this up because I'm sure as you're doing your homework and you're making your storyboards based on whatever manga you find on Nico Nico that day, you're going to find some clunkers or even something that just isn't necessarily to your taste. Just because something has achieved the manga goals that you're after doesn't mean that they are the gold standard to be studied. And my third hot take. You should make your manga read right to left if you're primarily studying and reading manga that reads right to left. Paneling is incredibly difficult to figure out, and if you're making your work read left to right, you're giving yourself an extra barrier that doesn't need to be there. There's more opportunities and resources if you just stick to right to left. Once you figure it out, you could switch orientations and you could start drawing for DC and Marvel once your manga Shonen Jump is canceled. Now, if all that sounds good and you're feeling confident, I want to look at what you've made. My podcast, the Scooter Pitch Podcast, reviews people's pitches for manga as well as their completed works. This is a special benefit for my YouTube members where you can get personalized individual feedback on your manga. Right now, it's only $2 to submit your stuff. No promises it'll stay that low forever, and you'll find the submission form in the membership tab. If you're specifically looking for help with your paneling, you can leave a note when you submit your work. You can submit any kind of art, but I'm specifically trying to find more manga-ka to submit because, that's the art form that I know the best, so that's what I want to talk about. Which is why I'm telling you about this here. You just watched a video about paneling. Odds are you make manga. Now I want to see what you got. Thanks for listening.